So I'm just wondering, is there anyone here who doesn't know that Texas was hit by a hurricane? Okay, just wanted to make sure. How about the flooding that's taking place in Bangladesh? Yeah, and also the fires in Montana. So there's a lot going on. And when we chose this topic, and I say we because this was a topic that is being talked about across the Centers for Spiritual Living, we obviously didn't plan to have all these natural disasters taking place, but they create quite the backdrop for this topic of how it is that we create hearts of service and how that we allow love to be a movement of community service. And so I also had the idea of do unto others as the title pop into my mind. And so I'm sure all of you know what we normally say at the end of that sentence, do unto others. Okay, I figured you'd know that one. So I found it interesting when I was reading in the June Science of Mind magazine what Reverend Petra Weldris had to say in her article, Taking Responsibility. In here, she starts out with a quote by Ernest Holmes and then moves into some interesting ideas that made me think about what we're doing when we're creating our hearts of spirit or service. She said, "We are free to choose anything which we wish, but we must accept the responsibility of our choices." And then she says, "My initiation into taking responsibility happened when I became conscious of whining. Why do I have to be the one who's responsible for trying to be conscious, to be loving, to be present, to be positive? Why can't they be responsible for being spiritual people so I can have a tantrum and simply behave poorly?" I can relate. I don't know if anybody else can. Then she said, "A powerful initiation in spiritual living comes when we start to take responsibility for the way we show up in the world, our vibrational rate, and the benevolent presence we came here to be." Why do we have to be the ones? Because at that moment, we are the one with a capital O. And exercising our ability to respond, I liked that response ability, from a spiritually grounded, centered place not only makes a difference in the moment, it becomes the generalized mold from which the law continually creates our life. She's talking about how she's responding to events that have happened in her life. So she shares a bit more, and then she says, "Who's responsible? When I was a child, this usually meant who's to blame or who is at fault. In most companies, families, and relationships, taking responsibility meant finding fault and assigning blame, which then led to shame and victimhood." And she talks about how that's not necessarily helpful. And then she has the next paragraph, choosing to respond differently. When we realize that life is actually about having the ability to respond, we discover that as adults, we are able to choose to respond differently. And she continues to share about her life and how she's applied those principles to it. And I was thinking about it in terms of the situation as I was watching Hurricane Harvey continue to do what it was doing. And so when you think about placing blame in a situation that we would call a disaster, or even a situation that's difficult or challenging or an accident, who does placing blame serve? No one. Absolutely no one. All it does is add to that atmosphere of confusion, lack, separation, and doubt. Ernest Holmes says in the Science of Mind text, "False ideas heaped upon false ideas make bad matters worse. The whole confusion of the world arises from fundamental errors of thought." And so that said to me that blame is one of those false ideas. It doesn't serve, it doesn't uplift. And what I noticed that I thought was very interesting is that each time the interviewers tried to get the responders to go down the path of, well, who's to blame for this? Do you think the government prepared enough? Do you think the city was ready? They wouldn't go there. They said, we're here saving lives. That's what's important right now. And when they tried to get the people who were being saved to also go down that path of placing blame, the people would say, we're just so grateful. We're so grateful we're where we are. We're grateful we've been saved. And so I think a more truthful, good idea is choosing our response ability. How are we able to respond in any moment? And looking at how that can be of service, how that helps us to increase our heart of service. So again, as I watched the news, one of the things I noticed is that there was no one thing that was the way to respond.
Got a ring, babe. Ring.
Oh, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm vibrating. Yeah, we're ringing. Someone's calling. So I'm thinking, why would we want to choose to have responsibility? Why would we want to take that on as a spiritual practice and cultivate our ability to be of service? Why would we want to do that? Well, we've been told that God is a giving God. We've been told in the Hebrew scriptures it's God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. We've also been told that we are one with God, that we are God expressing. And therefore, we can conclude that givingness must be our true nature. But just because that's what a spiritual teaching says or what a religion teaches, and several of them teach that, and as well as give and ye shall receive, or to give is godly, why would we want to take that on? Why would we want to create hearts of service based on that teaching? So how about if there's a scientific explanation that backs up that? We do say we're religious scientists, so we often look to science in addition to the religious teachings. And in this month's Spirituality and Health magazine, there's an article by a woman named Emma Sapala, and she wrote the book, The Happiness Track. She's also the founder of FulfillmentDaily.com, and she is the science director of Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. Did you even know there was such a department? I thought that was amazing. I love it. And in this article, she talks about how it is she found this dream job, that she gets to do research on that topic. And so she talks about when she first went to Stanford. And she said, when I arrived at Stanford to pursue my doctoral studies in psychology, I immediately felt that manic buzz of an overachieving student culture, a buzz that included 3 suicides on campus the first year I was there. The competitive, workaholic, and frenzied culture of an otherwise beautiful and inspiring campus had surely played a role in the decisions made by these students to end their lives. And so she found a way to survive that culture. And she did that through breathing and meditation practices. And eventually she and another student created well-being, yoga, breathing, and meditation events and workshops for the other students. And they did that voluntarily. As she continued to do that, she said she was volunteering about 25 hours a week. And other students told her, are you nuts? You know, you're going to ruin your career. You're not studying. And most of the students were spending every hour they had in the labs or studying and doing their research. And she said that I was happier than I'd ever been. I was getting A's in my classes, completing my research projects on time, and ended up graduating relatively early, 5 years instead of 6, while gaining acceptance to one of the greatest postdoctoral research labs in my field. And then she continued to do research in that area, and she said that numerous studies now show that the time that I spent volunteering was so rewarding, fulfilling, and intrinsically valuable, bringing such delight to my mind and peace to my heart that it actually charged my battery for everything else. She talks more about what that was like, and she concludes with, one consequence I had not predicted was that feeling connected to others and committing to contributing to their lives made me more successful. And so there's the so-called scientific backing to how it is that as we serve, as we increase our hearts of service, that it's actually serving us, that we're getting a lot of joy from that. And I noticed that as I listened to the people that they interviewed who had done the rescues in this hurricane situation, that those responders were also expressing the joy that they felt in being able to be of service. And one of the things I've said here many times is that when we are experiencing joy, we are in alignment with God. And so I figure there's many of you that didn't need to be convinced that being of service brings you joy. And then there might be some of you that hopefully I've reminded, and maybe a few that I've convinced, that it is joyful, that there are ways that you experience something positive from giving. I just wanted to also share some words, just in case you need more convincing, from one of the first responders. This is out of the Navy News Service, and it came online. And it says that the sailors from the Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 28 rescued 14 people and 4 dogs August 31st at Pine Forest Elementary School in Vidor, Texas, a shelter that required evacuation after floodwaters from Hurricane Harvey reached its grounds. And they interviewed the 2 men that were flying the helicopter. I'm not going to read both of them. If you want to read it, you can after. But the second one said, and this is from Class Jansen Scamp, a native of Denver, Colorado, the helicopter's second crew member, who logged his first rescue in in his 6-year career, and the other guy had logged his first rescue in his 5-year career. And this is what he said. It was a very surreal experience, landing on the field of an elementary school in a relatively tight landing zone, rescuing people of all ages and even animals, wasn't necessarily what I pictured from my first rescue. It was very humbling and rewarding in every way. The people we evacuated had lost their homes. They were scared and they were sad. But most of all, they were so grateful for the help they received. This will forever be one of my most memorable experiences. And that type of response to being of service in this situation is what we're hearing over and over and over again. And so, like I said, I've been watching and reading and noticing that there are a multitude of ways that people have been able to open their hearts and be of service in this situation. And it reminded me of what Edwene Gaines says in her book, 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. She has a chapter, the last chapter, called Finding Your Divine Purpose. And in there she says, but don't feel that you have to aspire to martyrdom. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about being of service. She says, what if there is no supposed to in life, no one single way to live your life? Instead, what if it was all about choice? Unlimited opportunities and choices based upon your soul's yearning, your soul's natural desire to grow, learn, unfold, and become the person you have come here to be. And I believe that as we're thinking about being of service, that there's not a lot of difference between that and finding our divine purpose in life. And that there is no one way that that can take place. There's no one right way or one more righteous way than any other. And again, I think it's important that we don't second guess ourselves or compare ourselves to others as we feel ourselves drawn into opening our heart in service. And so I made a list of all the things that I've seen happening as different ways that people have been of service during this hurricane situation. First of all, there were those that gave their lives. That's sort of the ultimate. And many who were willing to put their lives at risk in order to rescue and save other people and animals. And then there were many who survived being of service. And a lot of people brought boats, personal boats. Some flew in helicopters, some had kayaks, canoes, wash tubs, anything that would float. And they were driving in large enough trucks to get through the water, and those trucks that go on land and in water. And they were there to rescue humans as well as animals. There were people that rode in on horseback to help herd cattle down the highway that was full of water to get them to higher ground. There were people that rescued horses and donkeys and pigs. Lots of dogs and cats and other pets were also rescued. There were those who provided places of refuge. I'm sure most of you heard about the furniture guy by now, who opened up his huge warehouse and let people sleep on brand new mattresses and couches. And churches and Muslim temples and community buildings and people who opened their homes. Neighborhoods where someone had a second floor and others didn't, allowed neighbors to come in and get up on that second floor. And there were other homes that were on higher ground that opened themselves to people that were not on high enough ground. There were those who sent supplies. We saw Pizza Hut taking pizza to people. The guys in the bakery that got stuck in their bakery, so they cooked pan dulce all night long and served that to people. There's the beer company that stopped making beer and instead canned water and sent water down to people. There are those that gave things like clothes, shoes, money, and other supplies, and those who gave of their time and their experience. I have a friend whose sister is a nurse, and she was stuck in the hospital for 4 solid days, sleeping on the floor some of the time and in a patient's empty bed at another time. And she shared how it was that throughout the day then they were of service to who was also stuck in the hospital with them. There was a doctor who took a canoe to be able to perform a necessary surgery, and those who knew how to help the animals that had been rescued. So they had that expertise. And of course, I am just amazed at the skill it requires to fly a helicopter, go down in a basket. I tell you what, I would really have to be at the end of my life to get in one of those baskets. And to bring them up and get them into the helicopter, just watching that, to me, that's an amazing skill that people are sharing. And those who shared their knowledge, whether it was the media or social media, helping to hook up people in need with those who had the services to provide the needs. And those who provided hope and encouragement. The woman that broke out in song in the shelter and helped uplift people's spirits. The man that we've probably all seen playing the piano with water up to his thighs. You know, those are ways that people have provided hope and encouragement. Every single one of those ways of being of service is just as important and valuable as the other. We all have a way that we can open our hearts and be of service. And each day we see different ways that people bring their skills and their talent and their treasure. Prior to this event, we had been seeing a lot of media that made this country look divided, full of hate, and full of contention. And this gave us an opportunity to see humans pulling together, being full of loving kindness across genders, across races, across creeds, and I just was baffled at and was so grateful to see how human beings were pulling together to help each other, and animals, including opossums and armadillos. That was pretty amazing to watch, too. So you might say, well, that's great for those people in Texas. They were given an opportunity to open their hearts of service. But what do we do here in New Mexico, where we're dry and we're safe and we're sitting here enjoying a morning together? Well, one of the things that I say always, that we can always do no matter where we are, is we can move into prayer. We can do treatment. We can hold everything and everyone in the light of what we know to be true through that treatment process. But as we've been reading, and as Ernest Holmes said in the reading this morning, our evolution depends on what we do with it. That our motto is to know and to do. And so as we listen, as we go within, as we do our treatment work, then we allow ourselves to be called into that ability to respond. We are called to where it is that we can take responsibility. And so some of us might be called to go help with the cleanup. Some of us might be called to send goods or money. And some of us might do as Reverend RJ said last week, and focus on creating light in our own corner of the world. And some of us might still be in that place of needing to do that inner healing work, finding our own inner peace so we can be ready the next time there's a need, so that we have enough within us to be able to give, so that we can develop that level of responsibility. So we listen and we go within. And right here in Las Cruces, and right here in this community, right here among all of us who are sitting here, there are ways that we can be responsive to other people's needs. I've created connect up sheets, and they're hanging on the wall straight as you go out of here. And originally the idea was that you could use those if, say, you were going for a hike and you wanted to see who wanted to join you, if you were going to, take a trip to White Sands and you wanted a group to go, so for fun events. But you can also use those connect up sheets to create ways that you can be of service together. If you want to get a group to go over and serve a meal at the soup kitchen, if you want to find a group that goes and joins Habitat for Humanity and helps to build a house, there are all different ways that you can use those connect up sheets to get folks together with you to go and be of service. And one of the things that we're focusing on this month that Edie mentioned is the September service project are the blessing bags. And there are examples of them in the back. And in your bulletin, it tells you what they're looking for to be put in those bags. And you can put those kind of things together and bring them, and that'll be part of what we're doing here as a community. I'm also hoping that we create some of our own first responders within our own community. And when I say that, I mean people who can respond. We have several people in this community who live alone. And when they experience an illness or if they've had a surgery, they need someone to help them once they get home. We also have people that are experiencing grief for whatever reason. And those people need someone to just sit with them, be present, to support them through that grief process. So I'm hoping that we create, through the angel clusters, lists of people who are willing to be the first responders to those of us in our community who will go and support people through some of these life events. So we can start here in our own corner, and we can reach out depending on how it is that you feel called after taking it into prayer. So as we do this, as we develop our hearts of service, as we strengthen our response ability, and as we find our purpose and create those connect up groups, I also think we need to remember, I started out with saying do unto others, and you all responded with as right. But what I've learned is that doing unto others as I would want them to do unto me is not always the most helpful. What I've learned is how I want someone to help me isn't necessarily how someone else will feel helped. And so what I've learned over the years, especially working in the field of disabilities, is that I ask, may I help you? Would you like help? Some people might look like they're struggling, but they need and want to work toward being stronger. So they don't want us to help. Then I will ask, how may I help you? I don't assume that I know what everyone needs or wants. And as I was writing that, it was interesting because, again, on Facebook, an article came through, and it was a perfect example of what I was talking about in my mind. And it was called Disaster Relief. It was written August 31st of this year. And all these words are run together. I think this means it was a blog site, but it's called The Pilot Wife Life. And this woman spent about 5 paragraphs apologizing for what she needed to share, but she felt like she really needed to share this. So finally she gets down to, so here's where I get to say the really hard thing. Some of the items you are sending are the wrong donations. Just hear me out. I sorted and bagged and bagged and bagged hordes of sweaters, winter coats, lingerie, stained undergarments, and prom dresses. She said, I know your hearts are in the right place and you are rightfully imagining that we have lost everything, because many of us have. But frankly, these things do not help our current situation. In fact, they hinder our efforts more than a little bit. We do not need coats and sweaters in Houston right now. Believe me, we don't. It's 90 degrees and 99% humidity. Send us fans, bug spray, not sweaters. Most of us never owned a single coat to begin with. True story, is what she said. Then she says, and we are pretty much the least sexy area in the entire United States right now. She describes that a little more, and she says essentially that we are either emotionally spent, living in shelters, comprehending great loss, or working so many long, hard hours that we fall onto whatever bed, air mattress, or piece of concrete we can find at the end of our shift and black out. Lingerie just isn't the right thing now. she talks about undergarments and other things that have been sent, and she ends with explaining how we can determine what they need. And so one of the things we put into this week's e-newsletter are 3 centers that are New Thought in the Houston area that are serving as donation funneling sites. So you can go to their sites. I think we also put the information, I'm not sure if it ended up in your bulletin or not, but if you want to see it and you don't get the e-newsletter, see me and I can tell you. But they are going to sort of let people know what's needed in communities and in their environment, not just the church people, but the people in the communities at large. And so they're acting as places that we can find out what's really needed and send it if you feel so called. And so not just this situation, but any situation, it's important to make sure that what we want to do, she says, don't just empty your drawers and bureaus into random bags and send them to us, but instead find out what's really needed. So one of the things that I have said for years, because this is more what rings true for me, is do unto others as they would like you to do unto them. So think about that. As they would like you to do unto them. And so finally, as we focus this month on opening our hearts and creating hearts of service and doing unto others, I think it's really important for us to remember that there are no others. That as we do for others, we're doing for another expression of spirit that's part of who we are, that's one with who we are. And so I wanted to conclude with some questions that ran through my mind that I journaled after I was watching a lot of this and thinking about what it means to create hearts of service. And again, part of what was inspirational to these questions is the fact that we are right now in this moment dry, safe, here in New Mexico, and we have our food, hopefully, and our shelter, and we're all dressed this morning, as far as I can see. And so these questions are what came to my mind as I thought about what I've seen in Houston, which is a beautiful display of humanity serving humanity. And so I ask, just food for thought, can we, and when will we, develop our hearts of service and serve in this way without tragedy pushing us to do so? When and can we learn about who we are and how we can express in the world without adversity and drama? I believe it's possible, but we have to choose it. We have to choose on a daily basis to create that activity in our life, to participate in our learning and to seek out ways that we can be of service. Can we choose to live a clean and sober life without hitting bottom first? The teaching says you've got to hit bottom first. I don't know that I believe that. Can we choose a new path filled with light without having to go so far down that rocky and dark road that we can barely see and we can't walk anymore? Can we choose to love and get to know as well as support our neighbors and fellow human beings, each other in this community, without a flood being put to our backs, pulling us and putting our lives at risk? Must heroism, with its flip side of rescuing victims, fuel our openness and our ability to serve? Or can we practice serving as a way of being without or with disasters? Can we recognize and practice our true giving nature, our serving nature daily without provocation? I believe we can. I really believe we can, but that requires becoming conscious. That requires looking at what is our response ability and how can we grow that? How can we expand our hearts of service? How can we become aware of what's going on right in our own community, and how can we expand that out to the larger community? And how can we, if we need to, ask for the help that we need and give others the opportunity to serve? It takes both of those things. Neither one is greater than the other. So, as I continue to envision a world that works for everyone, one of the things that I'm envisioning is a world where people's hearts expand in service across, as I said before, race, creed, age, ability, political affiliation, sexuality, sex, gender, all of those things. Because in that way, we're truly then weaving that awareness of our oneness and our wholeness and living it, doing it, not just thinking about it. So Ernest Holmes gave a talk in Asilomar before everybody at the Asilomar conference went home. And they transcribed his talk, and it's called The Sermon by the Sea. And this is just a small part of what he said in that sermon. How important it is that each one of us in his simple way shall live from God, with God, in God, and to each other. That is why we are here. And we are taking this back with us. He's talking to people that are going home. We're taking this back with us, I trust, a vision and an inspiration, something beyond a hope and a longing, that the living Spirit shall through us walk anew in its own creation, and a new glory will come with a new dawn. And so let us develop our hearts of service. And as we do that, let's remember as we seek out our own responsibility that we want to do unto others as they would have us do unto them. Because deep down, there really are no others. And so it is.